Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 12th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and Ralph Kohler is sharing his screen, and Simo Helston is also here. Ralph, go ahead.
The issue we are looking at is issue number 3449181. The content overview views view filters out unpublished content, an issue, quite one, raised on Tuesday in the UX channel. And it's mainly about wordsmithing. As you can see in the steps to reproduce, the content overview views view filter out unpublished nodes that the given user otherwise would have access based on the node access. I've tried to basically follow the steps to reproduce, but I was unsure if I was missing something, and I was unable to get to that HTTP to 100. And as you can see here, the thing quite one asked for is feedback about the changed string. It changes from filters out unpublished content if the current user cannot view it to filters out unpublished content if the... Wanted to say something?
I see that Alfred Schall just joined us, but
Oh, okay. Change the string to filters out unpublished content if the current user cannot view it. Does nothing when node access is in use.
I guess, first of all, the issue title seems a little complicated to me. When they talk about the content overview views view, they mean the view that generates the page admin content.
Yep.
At least I assume that's what it is. And so is this really about the admin or published filter?
In detail, I'm unsure. I just skimmed through the issue and have taken a look at the string itself. And as I said, I was unable to follow all the steps to reproduce yet. Is that the right one? No, that's not the right one. That one here. No. Oh, there it is. I quickly drag that over. Enable, yeah. I've created basically a content viewer, as you can see here. Assigned the role content viewer, and in permissions as suggested, if you scroll down, I've added the access navigation bar that is necessary to enable, and access the content overview page, which is listed in point 1. Node admin permissions must not be granted. I've only view own unpublished content and use the administration page. Those are the points, permissions I've added, and use the toolbar. And I've also created a test page, a node, which is unpublished.
And you're currently logged in as that user?
As the admin at the moment, and I can switch over as the Drupal 4 content viewer admin. That's the wrong window. And I'm unable to see the unpublished content, which is correct. But point 3, enable a node access solution that would grant access to unpublished nodes to content viewer user. That step I was uncertain how it was meant. Quickly df share. The user is either admin or content viewer admin. Admin as the password each time.
Yeah, the third point in the steps to reproduce is a little open-ended. It says enable a node access solution that would grant access to the unpublished nodes to the content viewer user. So I'm not sure whether granting the permission view own unpublished content is what they have in mind. It might be. But anyway, under remaining tasks, they just asked to review the new text, which I guess is shown in the user interface changes.
Yep.
In the after text, it says does nothing when node access is in use. And I find that quite vague because kind of node access is something that's already in the core by permissions. So that's in kind of a common terms, that's a sort of node access. So I think that's not really, doesn't give enough information, I think, about that. It's a specific way to manage node access. So that's not very useful for someone who is not familiar with what it does.
Right, and that's related to the problem I pointed out with the instructions, that step 3 needs more detail. Oh, and I see that Aaron Mikhail has joined us too. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, all.
So first of all, even though they're only asking for review of the text, I think we have to consider the usability of the issue as a whole. And what is the point of providing a filter that doesn't do anything? I don't know, maybe that's already been discussed on the issue, but I guess one advantage to providing the filter, even if it doesn't do anything, is that people expect it to be there and might look for it. And there's some advantage to having it there, but have this message rather than simply be missing.
Another thing is it's kind of a fallback, so it's sort of a default that's in it does something if the higher priority filtering of content doesn't trigger. So if there would be some kind of malfunction in the module, or it would be temporarily disabled, then that would take place, like that would fall in place, that the other filter. So it's kind of the order of in which they apply, I think.
Yeah, I think your first point is pretty strong, that it is part of the default for this page. So if we somehow disable it, that gets sort of complicated, and it's not clear how you manage that with configuration.
And I also feel that it's pretty strong to say does nothing. It does what it does, but the other modules or other content access like precede it in priority or something like that. So it's kind of it's overridden. It does kind of, I would prefer to use something like will be overridden when something else is in use.
That might depend on how the patch works, or have you already looked at the patch? Yeah, it looks like it's putting in an early return. And that is explicitly what is meant by node access, that there is an enabled module that implements hook node grants. That's what it means. So I think that we can do better. I think instead of this sort of conditional statement does nothing in some situations, we can do that same check, see if there's a module that implements hook node grants. And if so, well, if not, then keep the original message. And if so, then don't say if, just say this filter does nothing because such and such module is enabled. Am I not being clear? Because no one is either agreeing or disagreeing with me. I'd be happier if you all agreed with me, but
yeah, I actually agree that I actually thought about the same, but I don't like that does nothing. Maybe kind of because probably add something to the query. Anyway.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. So it's kind of removed. So it's
Yeah,
Oh.
Ralph was looking at the patch, and if there's a module that uses the node grant system, then, or the access grant system,
yeah.
then the method just exits early.
Yeah.
It really does nothing.
Yeah, but maybe it's kind of feels really weird to say that. I mean, I could maybe say it's ignored.
Oh, okay. Ralph says in the comments, I can't find the emojis for a thumbs up while sharing my screen. All right, so that means you also agree.
Yep.
Offer, Aaron, do you have anything to add? You're both still muted.
Agreed. Yeah, nothing else to add.
Okay. Get a thumbs up from Offer. All right. Well, it's my idea, so I'm happy to leave a comment to that effect. And I'll before I leave the comment, I'll read through the existing comments, and just in case things like this have been discussed before and rejected for some reason. Sound good?
Yep. Thank you.
Shall we move on to another issue?
Yep. We could take a look at the other one I've posted on the issue,
Sure.
if everyone agrees. It's an issue that got the needs usability review tag a few years ago already, but we never made it to taking a look at. So it's issue number 2619328. A required Boolean field behaves differently depending on the widget. It's basically, I directly demonstrate things in here. Point is, I've created two Boolean fields, both with the required field checked. Default value is unchecked for both, as you can see here. And if we take a look at the content types and go to, manage form display and take a look, bool1 is set to checkbox, while bool2 is set to radio buttons. That is the current state without the patch applied. If we go now to article, then you see bool is required and radio button is required. So if I say check, enter something, I basically have to click the bool1 and I have to enter. I'm unable to, if I just hit save, I would check the checkbox to ticked, and and bool2 is also still required. As you can see, no entry is also not allowed. I have to pick something. I've applied now the patch T-Testung. Content types. And same here. I've set required field. Oh, that one I disable for now. And edit to as well. Disable it, save it. But the point is, now if you go to manage form display, again, radio buttons have no settings, but if you go now into the checkbox, you have the option requires the user to select the checkbox. So technically, if we leave that unchecked for now and go to article, as you can see, and I select now B2 and click save, I'm unable to save. So the checkbox is still required, which is not communicated in the form, but it's now possible to save it with off, with the unchecked state. And as you can see now, we go again in that, manage form display, go down there and click requires user to select.
And now we'll get the existing behavior.
Yep. Now it's required. If we now save, it's required. Yep. That is basically what the patch is about.
Oh,
Or the
and I
message is.
remember the use case for this is accepting terms and conditions, right? There are
Yeah.
cases where you want to force people to click a checkbox.
Yep.
That looks pretty good to me. I have a feeling that they've implemented the advice we gave the last time we looked at this. Is that right?
Have you looked at it yet? Not sure. We haven't.
Well, we are not perfect about leaving comments after discussing it. An issue. We may have
No one has commented on the issue.
well, I guess this is one we let slip through.
Well, the only detail that slightly bothers me is for the case, as I've already mentioned, go down. If that is unchecked, that way it's still required, and that is not visible in the interface. The field is still in the field settings. It is a required field. And that is not communicated here.
I see Thomas Howell has joined us. Hi, Thomas. Glad you could make it. So Ralph, from the user's point of view, what difference does it make that it's required? Or maybe I should first ask, not from the user's point of view, from the backend point of view, what's the distinction of being required or not?
If it's required, it's expected that something is entered, basically. And if it's not required, in particular for checkboxes, it could be glossed over. And
yeah, on the back end, you can either not save anything for the field. And if you look at the node object and look at the field value, you'll get a null. Or you can put in true, or you can put in false. And saying that it's a required field means that that first option isn't available. You have to save either true or false for the field. So that's the backend distinction. When we say it's required, we say, every time we save a node, we're either going to save the value true or we're going to save the value false. Now, from the user's point of view, if the widget is a checkbox, either they're required to check the box, like for terms and conditions thing, or they have the option of leaving it unchecked or checked. So required means two different things for the front end and the back end. And it makes sense to me, at least, that when you add a field to a content type, the required means that the back end thing, and whatever happens on the form is a second consideration. In other words, I'm not bothered by the current behavior. I think this works great.
Yeah, functionally, I agree. It's just it just feels, for me, it's just odd if some detail that is defined in the back end is not is still communicated for one in regards of the checkbox in basically the front end, while for the other it's implicit and not communicated explicitly like for B2. It's a nitpick. In the end result, it makes no difference. I agree, but still.
So I guess I would say that what's going on the back end is an implementation detail, and there's no real use in making that transparent to the user. The user needs to know, am I allowed to leave this checkbox unchecked, or do I have to check it?
But would there be a case for a form entry here where it, like, for example, like for terms and conditions, where it's mandatory to have a checkbox checked? Is there something that could have, for example, negative consequences? If it's glossed over, it's a required field, and if a checkbox remains unchecked.
I think this is kind of using the term required is not exactly what we look at here technically, because technically it's a little bit more like allowed values. So it's not allowed to enter a value false for the checkbox, but it's kind of how the user sees it and how it's kind of what's the convention is a little bit different. But logically, it's more, the one is about allowed values and the other one is about required.
I guess one way of looking at it is that either the allowed values are true and false, or the allowed values are true, false, null. Is that what you're thinking, Simo? And the null option is shown here in the default value form as n/a, not applicable, or not available.
But technically, it's out of the scope for this issue probably, or if required is checked, then the default value options should only be off and on. which is directly going into the point Simo made with allowed values. NA is not available, is not an allowed value here for the default value if the checkbox is checked.
Right. So I guess that selecting not available is the same as not setting a default value at all, which I would say is potentially confusing, not necessarily a problem. And I'd also say it's out of scope for this issue.
Yeah, I also already said so. Yep, said that. Yep.
I wonder if there's any difference the way the configuration is saved between not setting a default value and setting a default value of NA. But again, that's out of scope for the current issue.
For 1 second. Is huh. Okay. No, it's okay. And what do you think about the string, everyone?
Should it have require instead of requires? Use field label instead of uses field label. So it should be require the user to instead of requires the user to. So they don't match. We should change one of them.
Quite one asks the same question. And since the first line is existing text, I think we should change the second one, the new line, to be consistent.
Yep.
Weird that this option is on the field widget and not in the field settings.
So yes, this is the manage form display page. So if I understand your question correctly, the answer is yes.
And that is odd. The order changes. It's also not related to the issue itself, but on smaller viewports, it jumps to the first position.
If you keep going, I think it's because the tabs eventually collapse down into a menu. So if you keep zooming in, you'll see it. That's why it's doing it. It's weird that it happens at different viewports though.
Okay.
The active tab gets listed first, it seems.
Yeah. It's strange that it's not doing it here though when it's displaying as tabs. That's
Yeah.
Weird.
So do we need further discussion about what the patch does and whether or not overall it's a good idea? Can we take a quick vote? Who thinks that the patch is a good idea? I do. Thumbs up from Simo. Thumbs up from Thomas.
And a +1 in the chat.
Yes. Okay, so good. We have consensus there. I think it's a pretty good implementation. And then this question about the microcopy. I vote for making it consistent with the previous line, require rather than requires.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay. And the only question is who wants to leave the comment?
I can write it.
Thanks, Ralph.
Just one question. What is your opinion about the point? It's out of the scope, but we could at least mention it for a follow-up issue. Oops, no, it was on here in regards of the default value. If it's required that it's showing the NA. Should that be removed there?
I think it's good to have a well, yeah, so that kind of negates the setting default value. So basically, if it's NA, then you shouldn't have that set default value checked. So I think it should be removed. Because it's duplicating something that's easier done with unchecking the set default value.
I agree.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, any has the same. I guess this was from before we had that set default value checkbox, because I think that might be a recent addition. So yeah, any is effectively the equivalent of not checking the checkbox, I guess.
Technically, it probably might require something like unchecking the set default value kind of changes some deletes the settings. So, but it's something might be some work that needs to be done on the form. But otherwise,
Okay, noted.
Oh, and I don't know if it's been discussed on the issue, maybe it has, but what should the default be and what should happen for existing sites? I'm thinking that the default should be unchecked as you currently have it. But for existing configuration to avoid a change in behavior, we should update existing ones to select that checkbox.
That might be a UI kind of thing, because like I might be wrong, but I have a memory of the checkbox like not always existing, like that set default value checkbox, and it's quite possible it's only checked if there is actually like a default value set in the configuration. If not, if one's not set, then maybe the checkbox doesn't get checked. So we might not need to be checked, but it might be there's not anything needed in that regard. It might just work as intended. Certainly something to check though.
So Benji, so you're saying per default, leave that one unchecked for new sites, and for existing sites, make that checked, or at least ask on the issue if that is taken in consideration.
Yeah, that seems to me like pretty much required, that we don't want to change the behavior of checkboxes on existing sites.
Yeah.
If there is a terms and conditions checkbox, then we want to continue making it required.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the set default value checkbox.
Oh, sorry.
So it's about this one here.
So we have time. Ralph, can you open this page?
Oh,
that's I was using the site that you you pasted in earlier. Is that different from the site you've been looking at now? Or maybe the easier way to do it is I'll just get the path component. Admin config development configuration single export.
Oh, 1 second, which one I'm sharing? Oh. Okay. Strange. Okay.
And then from the first drop down, choose entity form display.
Yeah.
And then node article default. And this is what the configuration looks like. So
Oh, 1 second. It's about that one, and we have to go into here. Entity form display.
then if you
Node
pick
article.
field bool 1 or field bool 2.
It's B1 and B2 here on that one, yeah. There's B1.
Right. So let's see, type, weight, region, settings. There's nothing about default value there. So now I'm just curious, if you go back to the form and you set a default value, but set it to NA, does that change the configuration?
That's on the field config though. That won't be on the form display config. I think you want the there's a different field config for that, I think.
So on here.
I'm pretty sure that it's form display. Oh,
well, that one, yeah, that one's form display.
Entity form display, node article.
Oh no, I think Aaron is right. I'm asking about the wrong thing. But let's have a look just for as long as we're here. So
B1
type with
required true. Before it was required false, isn't it? Yeah. Update again.
Yeah, so I think the one you're asking about, Benji, will be under
you're right.
field.
1 second.
Scroll up a bit to get the field B1.
Yeah, it's required false. Yeah. So that
Okay.
one is basically on the form display.
But Aaron is right. What I really wanted to look at was the field setting, not the form display.
So under field
Yes.
and B1.
Default value, and it has an empty object.
I'll just require
not,
that. Okay.
It's not this. This won't affect it. Go to the Manage Fields tab. And B1, right. Set a default value, but make it NA. Now maybe you have to do field B2 since that one was
Yeah.
the one with radios.
Field B2.
No change. Okay. So there's no difference on the back end between leaving default value unchecked and checking it and then selecting NA. So we don't have to worry about changing the data if we simply remove the option of NA.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I think that would make a good follow-up issue.
Cool.
So I presume if you refresh the field config for B2, it'll probably show us with the checkbox unchecked as well. Now, if you go to the actual page and then go to edit B2,
Edit B2. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so because that was on before and it was set to NA, so now it's off and yeah.
Ah.
Interesting that it doesn't remember NA was set. That's interesting. Okay. I suppose that's expected, but
Right,
yeah.
because this form is based on the configuration, and we just checked that the configuration doesn't
Yeah.
change. So
I'm just saying I wonder if it did in the past because they're now using like whether there's a default value is to determine whether that checkbox is checked. So I wonder if in the past like NA would have been like selected without a default value, but this is just a tangent. But yeah, as you said, I think it seems safe to remove NA as an option now.
yeah, and that little test makes it even clearer that we should remove it because check a box, select an option, save, and your choices haven't been saved. That's definitely bad.
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, actually, one other thing, check. So if you set like on or off as the default value, and then save,
Mm-hmm.
and then we go back in, and it should show us checked.
Yeah.
And then you uncheck the checkbox.
The default?
And Yeah, uncheck that one and save. Now, if you go back in, what I wonder is what happens when you check that checkbox if it's actually removed. Yeah, it has. Okay, so we can the NA is effectively pointless now, basically, because to remove the default value, you can simply uncheck the checkbox. So that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. I think we're done here. We've gotten through 2 issues. I don't have any remaining questions. Shall we end a little bit early today?
Yeah, fine with me.
Thanks a lot for preparing those 2 issues, Ralph.
No problem. No problem. Okey-doke, then have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll make it next week.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.